Hey everyone, we're back. Here we are, Between Two Worlds, a podcast about, you guessed it, belief, unbelief, and everything in between. I'm your host, Scott Trout, here with my co-host, Mr. Joey.
Hello.
And I'm very excited today, very special guest. Can anyone guess? I'll tell you. We're here with one of my brothers. I have four of them. This is my favorite brother, but I am going to say that about every brother. This is Casey. Casey's here on the podcast. He is the brother above me. So I'm right there in the middle, the honored, the cherub seat. And Casey's number two. So Casey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So this is the first time having a brother on here, having a family member. Maybe more to come, other brothers, if you get your act together, get some interesting thoughts. Let's do a little introduction of kind of where we're at in terms of belief. Got the way that we do this. Say kind of this is what I'm a believer in this with some sort of qualifier. Casey, you want to go first?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this earlier, and what I came up with is I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and the qualifier is that I'm seeking. I came up with a couple of different qualifiers because I was trying to really get at what it is that means for me, and I would say I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who is seeking to be his slave, so that I may call him my master. So I was trying to come up with something that would sound really terrible to this present generation, like something that's just like the worst thing they could imagine being. I mean, like, no, actually, that kind of relationship with God is exactly what I'm going for. We're talking about like a reality, so fundamental and so beyond our understanding, to be in a relationship that that integrated is actually what I'm going for, and that dependent is what I'm going for, and that possessed is what I'm going for. And that's the other thing, possessiveness. That's another word that people hate. So I just want to say that's what I'm going for. I'm trying to think of all the words that are going to trigger people and just make them just start vomiting. So yeah, I want to be possessed. I want to be enslaved by God. I want him to be my master, and not sexually. So this isn't BDSM. Like it's like literally I want it to be like, if you're thinking of like the bad version of that, not the kinky version, I want that. So there.
Dang, yeah. Truly surrendered, dominated, fully under the authority of Jesus.
Yeah, I guess another example would be like an animal owned by a person, like a dog or a sheep. I want that relationship. So there, anything and everything that can make people just be like, ugh.
Yeah. Dude, honestly, if I can get a relationship as a dog, I would be down with that, because I would get pet, I would get food, they will go with walks on me. I'm down. All the things I need in life: food, cuddles, and just walkies.
Totally.
Also, another word for everyone listening to get you triggered: moist.
Ah, yes. I had a friend in college who tried to make that the new cool. It didn't work.
The new cool. Oh, that's moist, man.
Oh man, that's jeez. That's not move. That's an oof.
Since you're talking, you want to go next?
Yeah. So it's really difficult because I had an introduction yesterday, so I have to think of a new thing. So I'm going agnostic again to switch it up a little bit, and that makes me a believer of something out there, and I want to say that I have the power of God and anime on my side.
An anime?
Yes.
Oh boy.
That's going to require some unpacking.
Okay, so I'm Scott, and I'm also a believer in Jesus, and I really like what you said, Case, who's learning to submit all aspects of my life to him, but am coming up against just how ingrained my need for affirmation from other humans is. It really hitting me recently. I'm like, ugh, I really still live off of that as my like spiritual food, affirmation from others. So that's the area I would love to see submitted. Cool. Well, yeah, hopefully we unpack this, including Joey's power of anime and Casey's slave relationship. So Case, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what got you to be fully convinced that Christianity, belief in Jesus, is what you wanted to stake your whole life on?
Yeah. I guess the way I've kind of come to understand that, because I think when you believe something, you don't necessarily know why you believe it. So that even that's a journey to come to understand. I mean, Joey, are you married? I just want to.
Nope. Not
Okay.
married.
Okay. Sorry. So I mean, I can't wait for you to be married.
Oh man, I can't wait for me to be married.
Joey can't wait either.
The point I was going to make with marriage is you believe that someone loves you at some point, or that they're going to be committed to you. Now that belief may be false, in which case you have a sad future ahead of you, but you believe it. But you don't know at what point you truly came to believe it, and you don't know why you believe it. Though later you may come up with some reasons as to why you think you came to believe it. So that's all I can really share with God is there's two anecdotal reasons I believe in God, and then one that I think is accessible to everybody. The anecdotal reasons are actually the bigger reasons for me, but the ones that are inaccessible to other people. So the first two is the change that I've seen in my own life through being in relationship with God, through pursuing him, through pursuing his word, and then also having him correct me through discipline and through the words of other Christians and non-Christians too, that are used to humble me to the truth that he has in store for me. So how can you make, that's not something that is accessible to other people. It always falls flat, but it's supposed to. That's not my witness for other people. It's actually my witness for myself. It's the change that I've seen happen inside of myself. So what happens is other people are going to hear that and they're like, oh, cool. Does nothing for me. It's not supposed to. I'm not offering it as a reason why anyone else should believe. It's actually just for me.
Do you have any examples of those cases?
So I would say it comes down to, being a compassionate human being, someone who Christ says the test of true religion is taking care of the widows and the orphans. And I've really come to believe that I went to India and, saw the widows there and the way that they're treated and the plight that they're in. And that really is where religion is tested. A true religion will take care of those widows. And if you have a true religion inside of you, your heart will break for that. And that will be the mission of your life, is taking care of the orphans and the widows. And if you make it more complex than that and you add more into it than that, you're just diluting what is true religion. And if you take out taking care of the orphans and the widows, it's not a religion at all. So I would say that I've seen that compassion changing inside of me. not to the degree of other people. I'm totally willing to say that I'm less than everybody, but it's more than I had before. That's a major difference. It's not so much that I'm better than anybody. I'm just better than myself than I was earlier.
Who you were.
And I know where that change has come from. The connection has been made for me, but I could never show that to someone else any more than I could show someone why I think that my wife is connected to me being a better person today than I am. A lot of it's, you know, through the slow tug and pull of two personalities, right? Eva wants this stuff. I want this stuff. I can't always have it my way and have the relationship, right? So I have to change in order to retain that tension. That alone proves that Eva exists and that she's in tension with me, because I'm having to shift away from my desires to stay close to her, to keep that tension. It's like dancing. So that's, for me, is God, is that I have my desires, I have what I want, he has what he wants. In order to contain that tension, I have to shift away from what I naturally would otherwise have wanted.
Okay, so this idea of God's changing of who you are, and that personal relationship that it ends up changing who you are.
Right. And so that's anecdotal. I mean, the only way someone could access that is if they personally knew me my whole life. Like maybe my mom will be able to, like, that'll be a testimony for her. But it would mean nothing to anybody listening to this. It would sound as flat as any of the reasons I would give that Eve and I love each other. The next one is a little bit more accessible, I'd say, but still pretty anecdotal. And that's the change I've seen in other people's lives. I've seen other people come to Christ. I've seen people, be born again, really try to pursue their faith. And I've seen it change their hearts and become more compassionate, more outwardly focused rather than inwardly, less focused on building some awesome career and actually thinking about working towards the betterment of other people. And like at the expense of themselves, at the expense of being an empowered person. What a load of crap that is. Like people who talk about, empowerment. I've got to become stronger. Get over yourself. Go help someone. Go live your life for someone other than yourself. That's actually how I see people changing for the better. So, and I've seen that through a genuine relationship with Christ. A lot of people call themselves Christians, et cetera, but I've seen when people truly pursue Christ, that I've seen that change happen. So that's an anecdotal reason for me. Also, no one listening to this can access that unless they know the same person. But that's for me, right? That's my testimony. So those are the first two reasons. Those are the anecdotal reasons that should mean almost absolutely nothing to everybody listening.
Actually, it's very deeply impacting me, if I'm completely honest, especially the first one, because it's the first time that someone talking about religion gave this very specific view on how they describe their relationship with God. Like, as a comparison to a normal relationship. I made quotes for the ones that are only listening. But that it's just a normal relationship and that the relationship changes on the way you change. And I really, really like that because it makes total sense compared to a lot of stories are normally about, oh, I have faith because I had this certain experience and that's why I have faith. And you just say like, I just feel it, and as a person I want to go that way and just grow with it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the same with Eva. I actually feel like marriage is always a great comparison because it's almost equally inexplicable how things happen. Like people say about their spouse, if it's a good relationship, I'm a better person today than I was when I first met. And it's true. Like I'm such a better person compared to myself, right? Not compared to other people. Whoever wants to like throw the prideful thing on me. I'm just a better person than I was because of Eva. And that proves the relationship to me, because how can you change without an outside influence? Actually impossible. A rock can't shift unless unless a force comes upon it. A force has come upon me. It's my wife, right? She has come upon me, has forced an immovable object to shift. Same thing has happened with God.
And Joey, that feels like new information, or articulated differently.
Articulated differently. Because again, normally it's sort of the same what people are saying, but this very specific comparison to marriage, I don't know, it does something. It feels like the right way to describe it, for me at least.
Cool.
But also because I totally feel the same. It's not from a relationship, it's from a friendship. I totally feel the same. If I look back at myself from 6 years ago to now, one of my friends made me read, dress better, get a haircut from time to time, lose some extra weight. Not because she wanted to, but because we had the same things we like, we did the same things, and I became a better person because this person was in my life and I wanted to change to keep up with myself. Not with her, but with myself specifically. So I recognize that as well. And I love that you found that in your wife, because I think that's one of the most important things.
And with that relationship with your friend, would you say like those changes you made also kept the tension between you? Like the fact that you were bettering yourself allowed you guys to stay, to retain or even dive deeper into a relationship with each other?
Yeah, because we're both totally book nerds. We, for example, yesterday evening, we talked for 3 hours just about books, just what we want to read, what we've read in the past, what we are reading right now, just talking about books.
Yep.
And I think that's just what keeps us as friends going.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like she introduced you into reading more, and then because you've been reading more, it opens up all these other topics to talk about with each other that you can have differing opinions or have the same opinion, or dive into new topics. So I think, yeah, it's exactly what Casey's talking about too. Like,
oh no, internet. Hey Siri, turn off.
Bad relationships enable you to remain the person that you are. So that's. Oh, is everything all right?
My internet just. I was muted. My internet just froze for a second.
Oh, okay.
What would you like to send?
is Siri in the background trying to send that?
I was like, who's the lady?
Siri's like, I want to help. I make you better. Siri's like, did you call on me to make you better? Siri.
I
Praise-
asked Siri
praise
to
him.
turn off the internet.
She's like, I'm always here to make you better. Siri, shut up and go back in your phone.
Exactly.
You're not part of this.
Who are you?
Man, okay, this is cool. And Joy, I'm glad that you jumped in and just talking about how this seems to be a different articulated. So Case, you said there's 3 things. What's the third?
So the third one is probably the least important to me, but the most accessible to everybody else. And it's the one that you'll find on the internet as far as reasons, like debates between theists and atheists and stuff like that. There's a whole slew of arguments, like the cosmological argument, I can't even pronounce it. I'll look like a fool. There's the Kalam cosmological argument. There's all these arguments. None of them mean all that much to me.
I don't know.
There's
I don't know if any of our listeners are going to know any of those things.
I'll just go look them up. They're all over. So there's all these ancient arguments, some that were put forth by Thomas Aquinas, others that were put forth even earlier. I don't know if Augustine was the originator of some, but there's a lot of ancient arguments for God's existence that are still used in debates today between atheists and theists. They're all good. I think there's power. They're good, strong arguments. None of them are the reason I believe. The one argument that is actually one that I'm not saying I came up with, but I came up with it for myself. So I discovered this for myself. I'm sure millions of people have come up with it for themselves as well. But so I'm trying to think of the best way to dive into this. One of the biggest things that has convinced me of God in kind of like an accessible way that for everybody else is the modern world and the miracle that I see as has happened in the modern world. And the miracle that I see is the emergence of the concept of equality. And you find that specifically with like a fine point delivered in Western law in legal equality. And just to kind of put this in context, it's never been accomplished. I challenge all of the viewers, challenge me on this. It's never been accomplished in human history. Legal equality for sex, for race, for class has never been accomplished. All the three of those has never been accomplished in any society in human history before it was accomplished recently, relatively, in the Western world, in Christian nations. Now, I went back and actually for myself tried to retrace where the different activists came from in their like philosophical and inspirational pedigree, right? So whenever you have a great thinker, they'll say who was the major person they were pivoting off of, right? So for like Karl Marx, if we're going like atheism or like stuff, he would have said like Feuerbach, right? Feuerbach was the person he was pivoting off of. And Feuerbach would have said Hegel, however you say his name, couldn't care less. He's the person he's pivoting off of, right? And maybe he would have said, I don't know. I mean, he was contemporary with some different people.
Spinoza, maybe.
But yeah, I mean, Spinoza was someone that everyone was referencing, but maybe he would have said Hume, or, you know, they were all pivoting off of someone that preceded them pretty closely. Well, you can do the same thing with legal equality. A good starting place would be, well, you could just start with like the Civil Rights Act of 1960. You could just go with Martin Luther King or someone like that. Who was he pivoting off of?
Okay, so
right?
when you say pivoting, I realized that it's at a Bible study once I used that word and people are like, what does that word mean? But so you mean like, it's like when someone cites their sources. Based on the thinking of this person, I now am expanding it to say this. Like, is that so? It's like it's citing your sources. It's like because of the thinking of this person, I'm now advancing into this.
It's the giant whose shoulders you're standing on.
Okay.
And you're giving credit to them.
Got it.
So I trace this back in what every single activist in America and Britain as well references, and elsewhere in the world too, is the Declaration of Independence. So they'll reference this document. Even Frederick Douglass referenced the Declaration of Independence for his activism. Susan B. Anthony referenced it for her activism. So it's a good place to go back to is the Declaration of Independence and say what happened there, right? It was written by somewhat, I'd say, like a deist, Thomas Jefferson. Well, not like your like prime example of a Christian, right? There's some debate whether he was a Christian or not, but I'm even willing to just offer him up as not a Christian. Okay, so this is not important. The question is, what did he pivot off of to put down the Declaration of Independence? So what's interesting is he actually says himself of the Declaration of Independence that he didn't come up with the concepts in that document, that he was actually bringing together the ideas that were surfacing, that were common among the people at that time. And he actually wrote that document largely taken from the Declaration of Independence of Virginia. And document was written by a man who I'm about to forget his name. I think it's George Mason. But anyway, George Mason, this is so, okay, quick, interesting, fascinating note about this. And I could go look up his name. Forgive me if I got his name wrong. But George Mason, he actually wrote a document, the Declaration of Independence for Virginia, which is almost the same as the one for the United States. But he was one of the few guys who was asked to sign the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson wrote and refused. And he refused, even though he was the originator of those ideas, he refused because he didn't want to have those ideas connected with a nation that had slavery. Because he had written those concepts to represent a nation that was actually largely abolitionist. And so when people say, well, the words that Thomas Jefferson wrote can't be genuine, they can't actually be, have conviction in them, or can't actually be talking about all men because the nation had slaves. But that's because they don't understand history. The actual person who wrote those words refused to sign the Declaration of Independence for the very reason of slavery. Anyway, so my point is, where do these ideas come from and why are they there? They're coming from people with a conviction. George Mason was actually a very strong Christian in comparison to Jefferson. Well, where was he pointing backwards? Where was he pivoting off of? Where was the whole nation of America pivoting off of for their abolition? It was actually, a lot of it was the Quaker movement, the Puritan movement, all these different movements coming out of Britain, seeking freedom. That's where they were pivoting. And where did they get that concept of the equality of man, of people being equal and not having that hierarchical structure? It actually comes from their church structure. They came from the mainland, from Britain, some people, mostly Britain, came from the place where there was a great structure, where there was people who had closer access to God, and people who had to just listen. And in their churches, they said, everybody has an equal right to speak because everybody is equally a priest unto God. There's no priest class. Everyone is a priest. Everyone has access to Christ Jesus. There's no vicar of Christ. There's no one closer. This was the great revolution of Protestantism. So everyone was equal in the church. They all had an equal right to speak. They were all equally priests in Christ. And so that translated over into America. So then you can ask, okay, so where did that idea come from? Well, obviously that came from Martin Luther and Calvin in 15 of quotes from them saying that we are all equally priests. We all have an equal right to translate the word of God and to interpret it for ourselves. We all have an equal right to say, I have a real relationship with Christ and I can speak with authority about that, just as much as anybody else can. So that's where that concept of equality came from. But then you can ask the further question, where did Martin Luther get that concept from? It comes straight from Jesus Christ's own mouth. And he says, in me, there's neither Jew nor Greek, right? That's race. There's neither slave nor free, class, nor male nor female, sex. He destroys all three of those. And that's one of the best verses, and there's plenty of others, but Christ makes it very clear, in him, there is not those distinctions, that in the context of Christ, we are all equal. When we knock on the door of heaven, he's not like, oh, you're a woman? Well, you had to do 10 more jumping jacks than men, and you did not. You did the same amount as the men, and you are not getting into heaven. And he's saying the requirements for being close to him are the same, regardless of your immutable characteristics. It sounds so obvious because of the context we live in. You have to realize that has never happened in human history. That's not actually what religions have done in the past. They've actually just inculcated differences and made them and subjugated people based on their immutable characteristics, or elevated them.
So,
so anyway, my point. Sorry, my final point. My final point. This is my point. Is that a miracle is defined as something that is welcome, surprising, and inexplicable by nature, therefore supposed to be the product of the supernatural, right? Merriam-Webster, Oxford Dictionary, look them up. That's the definition. So this equality happening in law is welcome, is a surprise when you look at it in the context of human history and how humans evolve. Think of it like you're an alien species looking at Earth, and you live forever, right? So you live for a long time. So you've been watching humans, and then just like that, everything shifts, and humans are acting completely differently with completely different. You'd be surprised. So it is surprising, and it happened very quickly. It shifted on a dime. And then I don't think, and this is the final part that I would want to defend, I don't think it can be explained by nature. So I don't think it can be explained by natural law. And so I consider a supernatural miracle of Christianity. No other religion has done this. I can show that as well. So anyway, that is my non-anecdotal, something accessible to everybody, miracle that for me proves Christianity.
So let me see if I can summarize it back to you. And then I'd be curious to hear, Joey, if you've got any thoughts on it. But this one is, if we look at the things that we most prize in Western civilization. So this is not just in the United States, not just in the Netherlands, but we kind of see the West, however you kind of define those boundaries, but similar values such as equality under the law. That it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. The party you don't get better advantages if you're a woman or if you're a man. Your white race, what your freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and so these values that have become almost so part of our system, so part of our psyche, the way we see the world, that we can take them for granted. It's like, oh, well, of course these things should exist, but they haven't throughout history. And those things exist because of Christianity's influence on the West. And the way you got there is by saying, what are the main thinkers that trace to the big ideas that we have as a Western civilization, equality under the law, things like that? What are the big thinkers that link to that? And you know that they're linked by who they're quoting or who they're standing on the shoulders of. And it can all point back to one source. The one you quoted was the writings of Paul in, I think it's 1 Corinthians, who ultimately follower of Jesus, as well as he himself quoting the writings of Jesus. So is that kind of what you're saying, Case, that this is a reason for believing not just in God, but in Christian God, because of everything that we value, and the source of those values is Christianity?
Yeah.
Okay. So Joey, is that new information? Or just, what's some of the things you're thinking about?
Dude, there was so much new information that my brain is automatically like pulsating. Like, okay, we need a moment. No, I actually, all joking aside, I've read about some of these points in a book called Stem from the Beginning. It's a book about slavery, and they're now at the point that America has been, getting people in. What slavery was, what Christianity was at that moment. So a couple things not really explained in the book cross over into what you just said, Casey. So a lot of things I resonate with what you said and how you said them. What I'm thinking, I feel like that's the perfect description of what a miracle is, and especially how I think a lot of people actually look at religions, but also spirituality itself. Like it's not to explain; it's just there. Something happened, and you can't put your finger on it,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's also what I found interesting. That's a bit of a different definition of a miracle than maybe what I'm used to. And Joey, this is maybe what you're talking about. If I were to throw out like an initial perception of what a miracle is, it's some cool human power moment where you're like, whoa, did he usually have that power? No, it's a miracle. And often I think through church history, it's like the guy who ate a wafer and the wafer wasn't digested. And you're like, it's a miracle. But Case, could you hit the things you said again from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition of it?
And Oxford. In fact, any dictionary has this definition.
So a miracle is
welcome, surprising, inexplicable by nature or natural law, and therefore considered to be assumed supernatural.
I feel the one that I've seen recently in a documentary with Zac Efron. He traveled the world with I'm bad with names.
Oh yeah.
He traveled the world, and they were in, I feel like, Italy, and there was this church that had healing waters. There was this girl that dreamt of a certain spot, and it was supposed to have healing water, but everyone called her crazy because she just started digging just in the middle of a city, and all of a sudden she actually hit a spring of water that's still there to this day in a church, and it started healing people. So
wow.
even people with cancer that doctors were like, oh, you're gonna die, they went into that water and they came out clean, no cancer whatsoever, they lived.
Oh.
So I feel like that's the complete definition of what you just said, Casey, as a miracle.
Yeah. That's exactly. It's welcome, obviously, no cancer. Surprising. Anyone would be surprised by that, and at least difficult to explain by natural law.
So, Case, yeah, I feel like these are really interesting. I don't know how you describe pillars of your faith or main reasons why you believe. You've got your own story of change through relationship with God, through interaction with His Word, as well as the things other people have said to you. You've got the evidence of changed lives of those that you know and respect, people who are genuine followers of Christ, which would be an interesting thing to see how you define that. And then you've got this societal pillar, this societal reason that you love the Western world and you want, and you see the source of those values that created the Western world. What would be some credible, or maybe in your eyes, non-credible, what would be criticisms you'd get for this kind of ideology or thought? Like where would people push back?
On the two anecdotal ones, or on my third one?
Maybe the third one.
Yeah, because the anecdotal ones are inaccessible to anybody. The concepts are there, but no one knows the people I know unless you do.
Because you would say, yeah, because it's like anecdotal evidence is that it's like, well, these are my experiences, this is how I see them, and then they'd say, well, I see it differently, but we can't get it anywhere because it's based on anecdotes.
Yes. The example I like to use is if I said, hey, yesterday, so the first example of the change in my heart, right, is like if I said, yesterday, I prayed to God that my water would be turned to wine, and it was. And how much would that mean to you? Nothing, right? Because it might mean a little if you really thought I was an honest person, right? But it's so inaccessible. But let's say that actually did happen for me. It would mean everything to me. But it would still mean pretty little to anyone listening to this that doesn't know me, right? Okay, so second example. What if I said, yesterday, myself and 50 other people prayed to God that our water would be turned to wine, and it was, right? That would mean a little something more because witnesses, the fact that you can have a lot of collaborating people means something, but still inaccessible, because how do you know we all didn't just pour wine into it? There's no way to prove it. You can't replay that scene for everybody. Okay, final example. This is the one that just should rock people's world. If I said, you can come to this corner of this intersection on any day with a cup of water, I will pray with you, and it will be changed to wine. That is accessible. That is ballsy. If I said that, that should impress people because you can test it. You can actually test that. The other two you can't test. So the first two reasons that I gave, if they didn't seem impressive, that's okay. They're not supposed to be impressive to you. They're impressive to me. They happened for me. But the final one says that you can actually come and experience this, and you can test this to see if it's true. Well, I just laid out a whole argument for why one of the greatest miracles in human history is a Christian miracle. You can go and test it. You can actually go and figure out if that's true or not. Go look at the history. Go trace it for yourself.
As well as potentially the evidence of there's not a similar byproduct of the other major world religions.
Well, that's the thing. Go look at those other world religions and tell me what you think they produced. Hinduism, the caste system. Read the Jewish laws. Tell me if you think they created legal equality in the Old Testament. I don't think you'll find that. So that's Judaism, that's Hinduism. Tell me if you think Islam creates legal equality for the sexes. I would like to.
There.
Let's not go there. But my point is, go ahead and look for yourself. I'm not going to make statements on them, but I'm saying look into it. Tell me if you think that, and that covers almost 70% of the world, just with those three religions. So that will cover most of humanity.
The one case I've been pushed back on is Buddhism.
Okay.
And I haven't looked into it, but that'd be
okay. Look into Buddhism. Look into Tibet, and look into Japan before they were colonized by Western ideas. Actually, look into the caste systems that were developed there. I'm asking people to actually have to look honestly into the cultures that were created by these religions, and it's not legal equality. It's not what you're going to get.
Okay, so pause. Joey, I can tell you've got a thought.
Yeah, I've got a thought, because the real question you have to ask yourself is, because we're a Western world, what does equality mean for you as a person or as your society? Because Japan, definitely not equal, but they try their hardest. But their statement is, if I'm a year or a week older than you, I am wiser, smarter, and better than you, because I had a week more of an experience. So there's never equality. But at the same time, they are, as a society, really focused on men and women are equal. Everyone needs to respect. Everyone needs this. Everyone needs that, based on also their religion. So it's also, I think, a big matter of perspective, like what is equality? Because Pharaoh, for example, yeah, there was no equality there.
In Egypt, is that what you're talking about with Pharaoh?
Yeah, definitely no equality. I mean, yeah, if you were Cleopatra, butchered that name.
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra, thank you. But if you were her, yeah, you had power. You were the shit, so to speak.
Right.
But other everyone else, yeah, basically a slave.
Huh.
So with going with that, and my dad challenged me with the Mongolians, and I'm sure the viewers are having their ideas. You know, the one with Japan, I would just ask people to look at it before it was colonized by America, because America actually drafted their constitution. So the U.S. Basically colonized their government to look like ours. And I'm not talking about equality in general, because I actually don't believe like our court systems are equal. I don't think that equal. I think that there's a lot of like bias that happens in the justice system. But I'm saying legal equality, legislation, things that come out of the legislative body. Legal equality has only been accomplished in the West, and it's the first time in human history. And so that's my challenge: is not is everything equal? Obviously, not everything is equal. I'm just talking legal equality as the miracle.
Okay. So you're not necessarily taking on like a wage gap or a poverty inequality. Right. It's just what is the because, and maybe this is worth noting, prior legislative inequalities were codified in the law. Things like only men can vote, or only rich landowners can vote, or only the knights in the feudal system can vote if you're a burgher, or if you're a
Peasant or whatever.
middle class or whatever. Yeah, businessman. And before that, yeah, it was like only the nobles in the king's family can vote if you're, related to the king or something. So I think that's, what you're driving at. Okay. So Joey, do you have any follow-up thoughts on that? Japan is not necessarily expertise, but you've watched a lot of things.
Listen, I studied that country so well that if I could speak the language, I could actually move there. But no, I don't have any initial thoughts. I just try to clarify also for myself which direction we went with this topic, and I actually totally agree. I don't think I can think of any other religion that did the same thing over all these years. Not in that regard, at least.
One of the well, actually, Joey, how are we doing on time?
We're about close to an hour in.
Okay, great. So maybe we should wrap up here ish. Case, so we'll come back and record a part 2 here after just a little bit of a break. I do want to hear a little bit more just of your personal story, because we're brothers, but one of the things that I appreciate about my 4 brothers is that we all have interacted with Christianity in just a slightly different way, whether it's the type of church that we've chosen to be a part of, or the way that we express our faith. And it feels like our personality is also kind of part of that equation. So it's a cool little tester thing to see 5 people raised in a similarly fashion by, same 2 people. Ben got spanked less, so, that affects things. But how, one, we're all still walking in our faith as Christians, but then how maybe some of the differences. So I just want to unpack a little bit of that with you, especially jumping into the Orthodox faith. You are the only brother so far that has jumped into the Orthodox Church from our Protestant background. So I would love to get into that. Casey, any other things that you wanted to follow up with on this specific conversation?
I think those are, the major points on that, without getting too far off, what we've been talking about. I think that's pretty much all my thoughts. I think the major thing that I want to say is it's not up for me. If people don't agree, they need to go look it up, actually learn stuff, have reasons why they disagree. If the things I'm saying don't sound convincing, that's not my fault. It's you got to go be convinced yourself. You have to learn enough to actually have convictions, and maybe the evidence will lead you in a different direction. In which case, come back to me and educate me. That's what I want. I'm not trying to say this is just believe because I'm saying. We don't have enough time to go into all the evidence that I've compiled. Yeah. Nor would I even want to. People have to look up these things themselves.
In case, would it be too long of a thing to have you comment on the idea that what you have put forward is not because of Christianity, but because of humanist philosophies working itself out over time?
Yeah, we could go into that. I have a response to that.
And is it that would be a longer discussion than a 1-minute thing?
I could do a little taster in 1 minute, but just because a lot of people do say they're well, it all came from the Enlightenment.
Right. Yeah. Stuff like that.
It just popped in from the religion of the Enlightenment.
But they would do something similar to what you've just done. They would take a look at Thomas Locke and Hobbes and different people like that, and then they'd go to Spinoza, and they'd go to and they'd work their way back to ancient Greek philosophers. Right. So they would find the origins of humanism and work its way similar to what you've done, the standing on the giants. And they would say, sure, Christianity had its impact. So they wouldn't say it's, of course, they wouldn't say it's because of this religion. They'd say we see Christianity's influence, but Christianity became a dampening influence. I think the thing they would say is Christianity helped to a certain point, And then it started like, it's like a bell curve. It started hurting, and humanism kind of had to rise out.
I think that's worth responding to, because that is on the back of people's minds. I think they'd be disappointed if that didn't get addressed.
That's what I was thinking too. And it might be nice just to do it in this episode so we can go in another direction the next one.
Oh, really? Okay. Do it. So do that.
Oh, well.
Okay. Okay. So I guess to respond to that, and I'll try to just make this a taster rather than like fully addressing it. So hopefully people give me some grace in that. But essentially, there's actually two enlightenments that happened. There's the look it up. There's the American Enlightenment that happened, and then there's the European Enlightenment that happened. There was some cross-pollination that happened, but actually not as much as you might think. The American Enlightenment was really a grassroots situation where brilliant people took hold of these ideas that were happening on the commoner level, on the level of the basic parishioners, and taking those ideas and things that were happening and giving them the flower of intellectual rigor. And that was really what was happening with the American Enlightenment. What was happening in the European Enlightenment was actually a secular enlightenment. And it actually did spur from, Plato, Aristotle, going through tons of people up to like Descartes, and from Descartes to Spinoza, and from Spinoza to Hume, and from Hume to
Voltaire, probably.
There from Hume, it eventually would have gone to a couple of different people. Kant, it would have gotten to Hegel, and from Hegel it would have gone to Feuerbach, Schopenhauer, and from even like Feuerbach, he was referenced as a pivotal person for both Nietzsche and for Marx. And from Nietzsche came, all of like Alfred Rosenberg was the great philosophical thinker of, and kind of like the prime intellectual mover of the Third Reich. And for Marx, that then went to Lenin, who was, part of the movement in Russia, but right. Also Marx is referenced by Mao, by Lenin, by Stalin, and pretty much any communistic leader will point back to Marx as the progenitor of their train of thought. So you can trace, and so what you notice about each one of those people, and Hegel may be like a slight exception in that he was like a Christian pantheist, in that he used Christian terminology to describe a secular world. But as far as being a Christian, if people don't want Jefferson to be considered Christian, then I don't think Hegel gets to be credited one. But we're not going to play a too different game on that. But they're atheists. It's atheists all the way through. They're all secular. And so you can say agnostic, what do you want? But they're not Christians. It's not a Christian pedigree. That is not what formulated. And so what you see in Europe and in the rest of the world is communism is a Western aberration. It does come from the West, but it comes from a secular movement in the West that had its real birth in the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment. Whereas equality under the law is the product of a Christian pedigree of thought that wasn't always the product of just great philosophers, but was actually like something that was bubbling under the surface among the common masses. And then given flower by intellectual thinkers like Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, all of these guys then brought it to the surface in a way that gave it distinction. So anyway, that's my response to that.
That's a good that's a good teaser. That's an interesting thought too. It seems like two paths were on the same trajectory, but then there was a split, and one was because of secularism became.
And there's not even a split. There's some cross-pollination is what I would call it. But okay. Aristotle to Descartes to Spinoza up to Hume, all the way through to Marx and Nietzsche, it's just secular. It's not a Christian pedigree.
Right. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Um, and then Joey, any things that you wanted to either respond to or jump more into?
No, man. I kind of want to know more. So, damn. About Casey himself.
Yeah.
So that's definitely for my part too. For this, oh man, I have so many things that I just have to think over for a moment before I can even think about responding. So
Yeah.
for now, no, there's so much information, all very fascinating. I have to say that, but it's too much for someone that never heard of it to respond right now.
Yep. And this is why we need you listeners, because of course we're just here in person. We're having a good old conversation. And what we really want is a community who fact checks and looks into things and does their own research and says, hey, what about this? We listened to that guy Casey and he mentioned these things. What about, did he consider this? We really want to welcome that kind of dialogue. So come at us, people. You can respond to Casey. You can send us some feedback, Facebook, Instagram, email, all that good stuff. But Casey, this has been great, and your research really shines. It just shows that you're hitting things that I don't even know these people. I don't know Hume. I need to look him up. And yeah, this next episode, we'd love to hear a little bit more kind of on your personal journey and how that developed, interacting with Christianity. So we'll wrap up there. And join us for part 2 next time. You've been listening to Between Two Worlds, a podcast about belief, unbelief, and everything in between. Join us for part 2. Bye.
Bye.